Welcome to Tea and Talk. I'm your host, Olivia Boughton. Today, I am joined by Mother Sarah Ginolfi. Thank you so much for joining me today, Mother Sarah.
You're welcome. It's good to see you. I'm glad for you to call me Sarah
Okay,
also.
Thank you so much. So before we get chatting, I'm going to talk about our tea. So today, this set is one that was gifted to me actually at Christmas time by our niece and her family. So thank you to Lauren and Richard and Emily for this lovely set. I thought it, kind of makes you feel a little springy, and we are still in the midst of cold and snow and ice right now, so trying to think positive,
Perfect.
warm,
It's lovely.
flowery thoughts. And this little sugar bowl here does not go with this set, but was something that belonged to a friend of mine and a musical mentor, Dorothy Blickers, who died last year. And I have had this little thing on the show before. She was an organist at the church where I grew up, and was very encouraging of my singing early on. So the tea that I brewed for us is a blend of a couple different kinds of tea.
All right.
So there's green tea in here, there's some oolong tea, and there's sort of a combination of different florals and fruits. So it has a jasmine element to it as well, and some mango and apple, and sort of a combination of different things. So again, with the sort of springy theme that I'm going for here with our tea. So I'm going to pour you a little bit, if you don't mind. And I do have sugar, if you would like any.
I'm glad to have it straight up.
Okay, well,
And
there you go.
As you're pouring, I noticed the flowers are the color that our bishops in the Episcopal Church wear. So Episcopal means bishop, and it's always that kind of rosish cranberry red that they wear.
Well, look at that.
Perfect.
Yes, I mean, it was an inspiration, I guess, and I didn't even know. All right, I'm going to take a little sugar for myself. So we'll have a little sip of our tea, and tell me what you think. Are you a tea drinker?
I do like tea.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
More coffee in the morning, but tea as the day
progresses.
on.
Yes. So this is not, this isn't a tea with a lot of caffeine content. The oolong has a little bit more caffeine than the green, but certainly not a wake you up in the morning kind of a blend. But
it's all good.
But that's okay. So, Sarah, tell me about where you grew up in your childhood and what that was like.
Sure. I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So that was a very fascinating experience because we were just surrounded by the Amish. My family was not Amish. It's a question I get often. My family was from outside New York City, my mom being from northern Jersey, and my father from southern Connecticut. So we were kind of Connecticut Yankees stuck in Amish paradise. But that immediately was a bit of a baptism into this fascinating cultural landscape, because in Lancaster, the Amish are pretty integrated into the larger English community, as they would call the non-Amish community. So often we would see them at the farmers markets or at the grocery stores. Before they developed it, there was an Amish community right at the edge of our neighborhood. Now many of them have been bought up for the vast sprawling suburbia that Lancaster has become. But I remember going to an Amish family to get ice cream growing up. My first memory is of in an Amish barn where we picked up our first cat. My first cat there.
Oh my gosh.
So to me, it was just this normal experience to grow up right alongside a community that was living into, for what felt like me, this very ancient version of Christianity in my young perspective. That's what it felt like, although as an Episcopalian, people would call me pretty ancient in my worship too.
Maybe not you individually, but
The
right.
tradition.
Right, the tradition itself. So how did you end up here in Vermont?
So it was the Trinity Episcopal Church is where I serve as the rector. I knew Bishop Shannon McVeigh Brown from our time serving together as priests in the Diocese of Indianapolis. And I was looking to make a move back to the East Coast. I had been serving outside the Seattle area. I missed the lush smell of the East Coast, and I wanted to be a little closer to my parents who were getting older and need a little more help. So I moved on back this way. I didn't want to be a plane ride away. That got to be very expensive, and Lancaster is not an easy place to get to by plane. You have to fly in somewhere far away.
I was going to say, there's not a central airport.
Yeah, no, it's probably similar here to Rutland, where, yes, we have this tiny regional airport, so does Lancaster, but it pretty makes it, I think our airport here pretty much goes, back and forth to Boston?
I think so.
The one in Lancaster is back and forth to D.C., maybe Philadelphia, and those are still a good hour and a half, 2 hours away.
Right. So it was your ministry that brought you here to Vermont. So tell me about how you became interested in serving as a priest.
So I was very churched growing up. In my family, I'm one of 3 the reverends, and there are 4 of us.
Okay,
so,
wow.
My father was a pastor in independent churches before I grew up. He had left the ministry and began serving in different ways after that. As a teenager, my mom became a deacon in the Episcopal Church, which in some settings, a deacon is a very casual, it's an important role in the church, but it's not one that requires, many years of
formal training.
You're kind of a deacon within your parish. In the Episcopal Church, you would be a deacon able to serve throughout parishes and the whole denomination. So I had a very positive experience growing up in the Episcopal Church. We moved from the Brethren in Christ tradition when I was 8 or 9, so I was a little older. I remember my baptism. In the Episcopal Church, we do infant baptism. And right when I hit teenage years, the church I grew up in had this program called Journey to Adulthood, which was a 6-year formation program for youth, 2 years at a time. It included, after the 4th year, a pilgrimage to somewhere. It could be in the country, it could be in the world. We wound up going to Recife, Brazil, which is in one of the poorest states of Brazil. And for me, my faith came alive in a very active way. I did a bunch serving with camps, youth camps. I was a camper, and then I became a co-counselor or assistant counselor when I was 15, and it was in that setting that one of the priests went to me, have you ever, Sarah, considered becoming a priest when you grew up? And of course, as a teenager, I said, absolutely not.
Yeah, right. How old were you then?
I was about 15.
Okay.
But then it was this call that kind of haunted me. And I tried to do other things. I was an English major in college. I loved writing. I loved traveling around. And I was a teacher in New York City. I wanted to live a life of service in some way. I also just felt very young to do this very, this weighty, important role of a spiritual leader in the community. But then in a way, ministry just kept pulling me back. And so I decided I had been serving a term with AmeriCorps in Alaska.
Oh, wow.
So I decided to return to central Pennsylvania. So you go through the process through your local parish first, and then through the regional diocese. And then again, you would be ordained not just for a particular church or for a particular region, but for the entire Episcopal Church, even though you'd serve in a local church.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it just kind of kept staying there, and then 3 years, I did various service learning things like teaching in New York, doing AmeriCorps in Alaska. I lived in Scotland for a couple months, volunteering with a community called the Iona community, which is a ecumenical, so many Christian denomination place of pilgrimage. throughout the world. And it was one of those things where I realized I couldn't keep being a full-time volunteer for all my life. I kept finding my way in church, but I couldn't afford to keep working for free or working for room and board. So, now I'm paid, but I have to be paid in order to survive.
Right. We all do, right? That is part of living, right? We all have to receive something for the work that we do, right? Even in the Gospels, we hear, right, the worker should be paid a just wage for
certainly
their
taken care of
their work. Right. Not extravagantly, but certainly to be able to eat and have a roof over your head and all those things. So tell me about your study. Like what do you need to do, or what did you need to do in terms of the length of time and where you studied to become a priest?
Sure. So as I noted earlier, the process began in my local congregation. So I was at St. Stephen's Cathedral in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
My mom at the time was serving as a deacon in the church I grew up in Lancaster, at St. John's Episcopal Church in Lancaster. And my mentors and I both decided it wasn't a wise choice for me to discern in the same parish where my mom was a priest. We're very similar and also different, and we wanted to be sure I was treated as Sarah, not just Priscilla's daughter.
Her daughter, right.
St. Stephen's was close to where I went to college, so some of my professors were members of the congregation, and growing up in Episcopal camps in the region, I knew a lot of people, so it was a comfortable place to grow and be questioned. So I had a discernment team of 4 to 5 people who then recommended me to the diocese. I went through the interview process with the diocese. That process from moving from a postulant, so someone, an aspirant, someone who is aspiring to be a priest, and then you're a postulant, and then you're a candidate. And once you're a candidate, once you're a postulant, you go off to seminary. So I got a bachelor's, or you could get a bachelor's in anything. This was before I did all the discernment work. I then went to seminary, which was Berkeley Divinity School at Yale. Yeah. So a really neat seminary experience where I was formed in Episcopal seminary, but it was within the wider context of Yale Divinity School. So the Master of Divinity is a 3-year program. It includes internships as well as studies. In the Episcopal Church, there's, we have the morning prayer tradition. There's evening prayer also, but morning prayer was something that my school especially highlighted. So every morning we were there at, I forget what time. It was early. Either 7:15 or, it might have been 7:15 in order to be in classes for the 8 a.m. class block. So we had morning prayer, and you were expected to be there more often than not. So, you might take a day off, but if professors and teachers and mentors found that you were there less often than not, you would be talked to. So that was in the Episcopal setting, and then in the Yale community, the Yale Divinity community, we would have Marquand Chapel, which was a broader, not just ecumenical, but there were non-Christian students there too, just some people just studying religion. So it was a very rich place to learn. I wound up taking a playwriting class also at the School of Drama because I was really interested in writing, and it informs me in all kinds of ways. If I'm writing sermons or putting these works together. There I had a training as to how to do dialogue. So in many ways, ministry is something that I live into and grow what God has already instilled inside me. So amplifying those strengths rather than thinking I need to put on this new person.
Right.
So in our tradition, it's very much drawing out the beloved child of God that is inside of you, not just this person. I'm going to incept that into my
Right.
mind. Just know you're beautifully and wonderfully made. We're going to grow you into this this person who is equipped for ministry.
That's a beautiful thought. It's a really beautiful thought. So, how long have you been in ministry?
Let's see. I was ordained as a priest in 2015,
Okay.
but I had began serving in 2014 when I graduated from seminary. So
Okay.
about 10 years.
Okay.
Now I can't believe it was my 10-year reunion recently.
Oh, isn't that crazy? Time
It goes quickly.
time does go very quickly.
It goes quickly.
So,
I realize I'm super cash, Mrs.
oh yeah,
I'm super cash with not having my plate on.
yeah. This is whatever. This is, just free flowing, having fun. So, you do you.
Great.
Okay. So I'm curious, 10 years in ministry as a priest, what has changed in your perception? What is more difficult or more challenging than it was 10 years ago?
Sure. Well, certainly the role that I carry now, rector, so the head pastor and the head and only pastor, is a very different responsibility than being an associate priest. So in my the first parish I served, St. Paul's in Indianapolis, is a very large, well-known, endowed parish in the Episcopal Church. So I was number 4 of 4 clergy. I served as the parish missioner there, where a lot of my role was to be out in the community. I worked with young adults in particular. So I spent some time at a desk because I always had desk work, but a big bunch of the time I was out at coffee shops or at restaurants or pubs even, and serving that community there. In the second parish I served, I was the senior associate, so number 2 of 3. Okay. But even then, I was overseeing children's ministry, women's ministry, and then participating in the regular wider parish. So now I'm the rector, so number 1 of 1. And so it's a far different set of responsibility. I have to learn how to delegate more in a way that can be challenging for me. I have a broad skill set, and I like to explore different areas. I simply don't have time. I think one of the things that has caught me most by surprise is serving an older historical parish is all the needs of the building.
Ooh,
so
yeah.
it's like, I did not go to seminary to learn how to become a project manager, and yet
that should probably be something that is covered, though.
Yep. Pipe bursts at 5 p.m. on a Friday night. There I am.
There you are.
Recently, we were to have a youth party, a youth Christmas party at our house, and I live in. The church provides me a house. 3 hours before everyone is set to arrive, I hear this streaming, and I think, is something wrong with the electric? We pull out both plugs, which if something was wrong with the electric, maybe wasn't the wisest thing to do, but here I am.
Sure.
So we pull, there's nothing, and then I'm like, oh no. I bet this is water. And sure enough, there was a water leak, a pipe leak in the basement.
Perfect timing, right?
We were able to pivot. We have a plumber for whom we have to be one of his priority clients because he came within 45 minutes. And another parishioner came to help. So we were able to quickly pivot and move our party to the church and go from there. But that is something that has caught me by surprise, that I could be very naive to. But in the other settings, they were also newer buildings.
Sure.
So, and both had undergone significant renovations in the 21st century, whereas Trinity was built in 1865, and the sanctuary and then other parts have been added on since then.
Yep, there's a lot that can go wrong in a building of that age, and that's an interesting observation. And I think, right, sometimes just generally in life, right, we're so focused, if we're in leadership roles, on whatever that leadership role is for us and doing that. But then when we realize that there's also these other things we have to be in charge of,
Right.
and knowing who to call and who to ask for help is probably the biggest advantage
Right.
that you have.
Well, and also, death doesn't take a holiday,
Right.
nor a vacation.
Right.
So, and those things are certainly priorities. Where
Right.
if I hear someone is dying, or someone has had the onset of a major illness, or a
Right.
major accident, or a family member has died, that's just all right. There
need to be
goes
there.
my
Yeah.
plan for the
Yeah.
day, and
Yeah.
and this is where I need to be
Yeah.
instead. So, in that way, ministry is challenging. People say, I hope you have a good day off, because we have a Sabbath day.
Sure.
Well, everyone else who in a normal 9 to 5 gets, I hope you have a good weekend. Like,
Right.
ooh, I hope you have a good day off. Like, thanks.
But if something comes up,
Please don't text me. The text, it's like, hey, I know it's your day off, but, and then like, unless something is on fire,
Right.
unless someone is dying.
do not speak to me for today. Yeah.
But it's happened. But just responding with those to those things with grace.
Yes.
It is always a challenge. I'm
Yeah.
human too.
Right.
Sometimes I feel like I'm on a high pedestal. There's a high expectation. So the higher you are, the further you fall
Right.
when you make a mistake.
Right.
I think that has been one of the most difficult realities of ministry that has grown on me, is the assumption that I'll be perfect all the time, that I am ever loving, ever compassionate, that I am. I myself am Jesus, and
Right.
it's like, I'm following in the footsteps
Right.
of Jesus. And clearly, even those closest to Jesus, the disciples, they were always being called out for misstepping.
Yeah.
But it is a true model of the weight and the challenge of
Yeah.
to living into this very countercultural way of life. What? You're telling me that me being in a position of power, I'm supposed to put that aside and serve someone else? And that the first shall be last. What is this? Blessed are the poor, pray for your enemies. These are not things that we are instinctively drawn to do.
No. No. And it's sometimes my observation that it's easy to say those words or listen to them when we hear them, read at service, but to live them is a lot harder, and that people often don't make a connection between what they profess to believe and how they actually are living their life.
Right.
I'm sure that you see that often, not necessarily in individuals that you come in contact with directly, but in more of a societal way.
There are layers. There are definitely layers to life, and layers to standing for anything.
Sure.
As soon as the louder you proclaim that you stand for something, all the more vulnerable in a way you make yourself.
Right.
Because you make yourself out to be potentially called a hypocrite.
Right. Right. What do you think is the greatest spiritual need of people living in our society right now?
In one of our prayers, we pray for the sick, the friendless, and the needy. And I think it is very easy in a way to respond to the sick and the needy. The needs are clear. More challenging is to respond to the friendless. So curing loneliness, curing isolation is a big part of, I think, what humans need, and what in many ways here in the culture of the United States we have lost. In the culture of our devices we have lost. Social media is not a a dear, intimate connection.
Right.
I'm, reminding some of my parishioners often, like, hey, is this actually a necessary post? Or how are you loving your enemy in this? You're here pointing your enemies out.
Right.
So we have all of these devices to, in a way, give a facade of connection where we think we have endless connectability, but the relationships on social media are very thin.
Very shallow.
And people, I think, gain a social media confidence to say all kinds of things.
Oh, yes, yes.
Out in the webverse that they would never have the courage to say, and never have the humility to say one-on-one to someone, because that is inviting a conversation.
Right.
Whereas that is inviting you to be open, to open your heart to someone else. So that is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I don't always have, building community is tough, especially when you're in an environment where, you're trying to say all are welcome, or we welcome all.
Yeah.
Well, do you really?
Right.
Am I truly able to be my full self? Or, especially in this community that has such standards, are those standards perhaps missing me and my person?
Right.
Hood.
Yeah. It's been so lovely talking with you, and our time is growing short. So I want to pivot and ask you something that I've tried to ask all my guests.
Okay.
And give you a little time to respond before the last 10
I'll
seconds.
drink some tea. I'll get ready.
Okay. So you've ministered in a lot of different places. You've traveled to different places. You've lived in different places. What is it that you love about living here in Vermont, and specifically in Rutland?
Oh, I think Rutland is full of so much life. It in many ways it seems like the most down on its luck community that I've ever served. There's been a lot of change, a lot of loss, and frankly not a lot of healthy processing of that loss. So here I notice a longing for nostalgia that is really quite crippling, that can be very, very afraid of change, even necessary progress. Changes life, changes reality. It is a core Christian, transformation is a core Christian value. So, and I know we too in the Episcopal Church, where we have a pretty standard way of worship, a Book of Common Prayer that guides us in our worship. Change is tough, even when it's good change. The ordination of gay and lesbian clergy, the ordination of women. Change is not audacious. Change is real, and yet when someone is unable to embrace that reality, it is a very painful experience, one that it affects the individual as well as whole communities. So in a way, it's a challenge. I like to be serving in an area where there's a challenge. I serve a diverse, not in color, but in ideology congregation, and that's what makes it exciting for me. It always keeps me on my toes, and it makes me feel like I have a purpose. I matter. I'm not just getting yeses when I preach. So I'm truly nervous. As I said before this interview, I'm nervous, but that's what means that means it matters.
Yep. Yes, I have had many people tell me as a performer that when you stop being nervous, that's when you should worry.
Yes.
Right, because something is missing, right? Not that your nerves should cripple you, but that little bit of nervousness is good, and that little bit of anticipation of what are you going to do, and how are you going to do it, and how are you going to affect that change that you want to see is, I'm sure, what keeps you a good minister to the people of your congregation and to the larger community, a good witness to Christian values and what you stand for.
Well, I always am trying my best.
That's all any of us can do. That's all any of us can do. you know. Well, it has been so great
You too.
to have you on. Thank you so much. It really, really very special, special time for me. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was glad to be here. Cheers.
Cheers, and cheers to everybody out there. And I'll see you again next time on Tea and Talk.